From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
A missile kills 2 Polish farm workers, but Russia and Ukraine both say it wasn't theirs. Plus, why are Yale and Harvard pulling out of the U.S. News ranking of law schools? Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues Kim Strassel and Kate Batchelder-Odell. Happy Friday and welcome to you both. On Tuesday, the missile struck about 3 miles into Poland from the Ukrainian border. There was some initial thought that it was an errant Russian missile. And then on Wednesday, President Biden said that was unlikely. Listen to this.
We agreed to support Poland's investigation into the explosion in rural Poland near the Ukrainian border. And I'm going to make sure we figure out exactly what happened. Our sympathy goes out to apparently 2 people were killed. And then we're going to collectively determine our next step as we investigate and proceed. It is, it's unlikely in the minds of the trajectory that it was fired from Russia. But we'll see.
Then on Wednesday, NATO and Poland were saying that it was likely a piece of a Ukrainian surface-to-air missile that was aimed at incoming Russian missiles and got off target or deflected. But Kim, it does show the real threat of escalation here. And what if it had been a Russian missile? I mean, Russia is running through its precision-guided weapons at a pretty fine pace and turning to some more crude ones that are harder to get on target.
The thing to bear in mind here is that even this does turn out to be an errant Ukrainian missile, this is entirely at Russia's feet. The reason Ukraine is having to use these air defense missiles is because Russia has been bombarding it. There was something like 100 missiles launched from Russia into Ukraine on Tuesday alone. Because Russia is losing its war at the moment and ground war over in the east, it's decided to retaliate by going after Ukrainian civilians and infrastructure, and Ukraine is trying to defend against this. None of this would be happening if Russia wasn't engaged in these kind of horrible actions. Also, I would note that Russia's been playing with fire, increasingly targeting pieces of Ukraine that are very close to Poland, including a military training center that was only 10 miles away from Poland's border, and that is playing with fire. So what I really hope is that I understand that NATO is probably breathing a sigh of relief that this wasn't Russia because it could massively escalate the conflict were it. But nonetheless, the response to this shouldn't just be like, oh, we're good, moving on. There needs to be some show back that Russia needs to cease and desist, or we need to do more to help Ukraine to stop them.
Kate, what is your read of what NATO's response should be here, or the U.S. response as the fighting continues to escalate in Ukraine?
Yeah, Kyle, I mean, to underscore Kim's point, the Russians are launching 80, 100 missiles a day here. And to your point about precision-guided weapons, I mean, the missile failure rate of the stuff that they've been sending, particularly cruise missiles, has been really high. So they are really playing with fire by just indiscriminately here firing missiles, some of which are duds or can't reach their targets. So that just creates a tinderbox situation. And I think even if this missile was an air defense missile from the Ukrainians, I think counterintuitively, we need to make sure they have more air defenses because that would help keep Russian missiles out of Poland. So I don't think you can overstate here just how fragile this environment is, given you have just such unprofessional and poor military tactics by Russia. To your question about what should we give them, I mean, there are still items on the shelf that we are not offering them. And I think one that we mentioned today in our editorial and have been mentioning for months in editorials is the Army Tactical Missile System. This is a long-range weapon that can plug and play with the HIMARS systems that Ukraine already has. And it gives them just a much bigger reach. I mean, I think the Army Tactical Missile System has a range of up to 190 miles. So it just makes it so much easier for them to target Russian targets that are further away and then also evade retaliation by having these more powerful weapon systems. So that is one thing that I think ought to be top of mind. We'll just have to continue to keep backfilling the weapons that they're using. But I definitely think this should be a fresh opportunity for the Biden administration to look through the stocks and say, maybe this is a moment here where we should give them more powerful tools to keep finishing the job.
Kim, what's your sense of the broader course of the war? It has been some time since we've talked about Ukraine on the podcast. There's been a lot of election news in the last couple of weeks that we've been bringing up instead. But I would point to one thing. This is an update from the Institute for the Study of War last weekend. And it says that the Russians are emphatically not attempting to establish and strengthen defensive positions all along the line, but are rather renewing offensive operations. It goes on to say that both sides are already fighting in very muddy conditions. They will likely not stop fighting when winter freezes the ground and makes it even more conducive to large-scale mechanized maneuver warfare. Combat is more likely to intensify than to slacken as temperatures drop, unquote. And I thought that was notable because I think a lot of people in the West have been expecting things to let up a little bit as winter comes.
Yeah, I think that that's absolutely right. And I think it's a warning as well to the United States and other allies who are backing Ukraine that they need to double down on their commitment to seeing this through in the long term. You know, we've had the Ukrainians really have some impressive military successes in the last few months, most recently the taking back over Kherson. But to the extent that they are clawing back their territory with every inch they get, you seem to see Washington at times and the leaks we get in the newspapers suggesting, well, yeah, but even though they've done that, the likelihood that Russia's ever going to give up everything is low. Maybe now is time to produce some sort of negotiated settlement. No, it's the Ukrainians who make that decision. And, you know, at least publicly, that still is the position of the U.S. government. But things are going to get harder now because Russia is going to get more desperate. We are headed into winter. There's likely to be more escalations rather than de-escalation. And this is why we need to be sending things like those longer range missiles, which I thought was really cool that Kate called them the Army Tactical Missile System, when they have such a cooler phonetically spelled acronym, which is ATACMS. I absolutely love saying that. So, but we need to be sending more of this stuff, redoubling our commitment to them and letting Russia know that we are as dedicated to this as the Ukrainians are, because that's the way you finally convince Russia to get out.
But one thing that will change with the lower temperatures is the energy situation in Europe. And I still believe that Vladimir Putin is hoping that that will weaken Western resolve. And here's a Reuters story from earlier this week. German authorities are stepping up preparations for emergency cash deliveries in case of a blackout to keep the economy running, 4 people involved said, as the nation braces for possible power cuts arising from the war in Ukraine. And Kate, I don't know that Vladimir Putin is betting correctly if he thinks that winter will weaken Western resolve, but it will be a lot of hardship, I think, for a lot of regular people.
Yeah, Kyle, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. I would just note to Kim that I refuse to use any Pentagon acronym that the public can't understand.
Attack them.
Exactly.
We're educating the public. Attack them.
Yes, no, it's just a wasteland of acronyms. My war against acronyms is long. Kyle, on the energy situation, of course, yes. I mean, I think we have really underestimated just the extent of Europe's reliance on Russian for gas. And we do need to think about here what the Europeans are willing to tolerate and how that might affect the NATO alliance. So I do think there could be show some cracks in what with, the Biden administration has been selling as a good news story that NATO is so in total agreement. I mean, but this is really an argument for continuing to increase our own production at home here, not putting ourselves in this position and doing whatever we can to weather it, because hopefully NATO members have been awoken to the fact that there is no appeasing Putin and that backing off helping the Ukrainians will not buy them anything with Putin.